Welcome to another edition of Brownsville Matters. I'm your host, Dr. W.F. Strong. I have with me this morning Hunter, who is a specialist in landscape architecture and plants and trees and birds and bees, I'm sure. And so we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the flora and fauna of the valley, because a lot of people, they know this, Hunter. They know what they see, but they don't know the names of these things. They don't know, the difference between a Chinaberry tree and a Washington. Well, they know the difference between a Chinaberry tree and the Washingtonian palm, but they don't know the different types of palm trees that we have, and a lot of the native brush that they just call everything mesquite.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Right,
Happy to talk about plants.
Thanks. Now, what is you have a formal degree in landscaping?
Yes, I went to the University of Arizona for my master's in landscape architecture, graduated in 2019.
Uh-huh. Oh, no, so not so long ago.
Not so long ago.
And then you did your landscape architecture in Arizona for a while.
Correct. Yes.
And this was parks and recreation and commercial sites? Or?
Yes, and some campus planning, so mostly in the public realm.
When you drive around Brownsville or the valley in general, let's say Brownsville, what stands out to you? What kind of mistakes do you see, so to speak? You say people, they ought to be doing this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, where do I start? To start off, I love Brownsville. I'm really glad to be back to start my practice. I've been back since April, and I love the plant palette here. And so it's really exciting to be back where I grew up and to be around the plants that I grew up around. But some of the mistakes that I see that are most troubling is really concerned around environmental equity and the lack of walkability in Brownsville. It's really difficult to walk places. We have sidewalks that are directly next to the streets. There's not enough plant material for shade. It just makes it really uncomfortable for people to move around. And so I'd like to see Brownsville make more strides in providing an increase in tree canopy, creating sidewalks that are more safe and create more of a boundary between the traffic and the pedestrians.
What is the magic number? If you have shade, you drop the temperature by 10 degrees or 15, or what is it?
It's about 5.
About 5 degrees. But you come from Arizona, so it's a greater difference there, right?
Sure, yeah. Because with the evapotranspiration, because it's so dry, that humidity that the trees produce has a cooling effect. Now, down here, that cooling effect is not as helpful. Great when there's so much water in the air.
Yeah, we're just a giant sauna.
Yes.
When I was out in Arizona, a lot of the outdoor restaurants had these evaporative cooling systems that they'd blow a very fine mist into the air and cool the outdoor of the restaurant, and but we can't very well do that here, right?
No, we'll all be drenched.
Only if a norther comes through, then you can do it.
Yeah. There's a couple other issues. I think there is an abundance of unnecessary turf grass. I think we need to start. We're in stage 2 of water restrictions, and there are areas that have been landscaped with grass that serve no purpose. I think there's a time and place for turf in parks and places where there's going to be active people, using it, sitting on it, walking on it. But when you see these strips of grass or just kind of expanses of grass with nothing there, it's a waste of resources to maintain, to fertilize that grass. And then,
well, what would you do instead?
I would create a more native, try to recreate more of a native landscape that would require more shrubs, less exposed ground. I mean, if people like turf, there are native alternatives to the Bermuda grass and the St. Augustine that we have down here. Texas A&M has made a bunch of strides in getting buffalo grass, making it commercially available for turf. It's a native grass that only grows about 6 to 8 inches tall and kind of flops over. So the look is to not mow it. It kind of has this very cool shaggy appearance, but it stays green and only needs about 5 inches of rain a year.
So what you're calling buffalo grass is different from buffalo grass.
Yes, it is different from buffalo grass. It is not it is not the same.
Is buffalo grass native?
No, buffalo grass, I believe, was brought in for cattle feed.
Okay. And then we also have the King Ranch blue stem, which is taken over.
Yes. Yes. And we've got, then there's the Johnson love grass and guinea grass. And guinea grass is one of the worst offenders because it really can invade in some of those pristine spaces. If you go to Resaca de las Palmas, there are some really beautiful old ebony growth forests, and the guinea grass has kind of crept in there. Some of the other grasses really take over disturbed areas quite quickly, but have a harder time spreading into some of the more biodiverse area. They can't really compete as well. They do better when there's no competition, and then they kind of take over.
If we could get in a time machine and go back to 150 years ago in this region, what would it have looked like? How would it be different? The natural grasses and trees, what would only have been here then as opposed to what we see today? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. Brownsville is right at the kind of epicenter of the convergence of several different ecosystems. So coming in from the north, we've got the coastal prairie, which would be the oak mottes that you see when you're driving through the King Ranch, and then tall grass prairie. So a mixture of different native grasses, because that was.
And then you would have like the post oak trees would have been here, and then you would have had. Some palm trees, but a lot is here today that is not native, right? Sure.
So then, so coming up from the south is our sable palm and ebony forests, which we have so few left because of farming and agriculture. A lot of them have been torn down. I would recommend if you haven't been out to the sable palm forest, that is a really great example of what an old growth sable palm forest looks like. It's one of the last ones in the United States, and it's my company is called Sable. It's named after our sable palm. That it's my favorite palm. Cool. And the only there's two native. There's the sable palm and then the dwarf palmetto. That are native to the region. So the big, tall, skinny ones, the Washingtonians, all down Palm Boulevard, are not from here. These are from California and Baja.
What about the mesquite? Was it as common then as it is today?
I have no reason to think it wasn't. A lot of the abundance of mesquite is because it's usually the first plant to reclaim formerly cultivated land. So once land's been plowed over and left to grow back, mesquite is the first thing to take over. And so
I'd always understood that when they brought in cattle to this area in the big ranches, the cattle ate the mesquite beans and then they spread them. They seeded the country with all this mesquite.
Yeah,
for the beans.
I definitely think that there is an abundance now that maybe not so much before. If you're out at Resaca de las Palmas and seeing in the ebony forest, you don't see too much mesquite in there. It's pretty spread out.
Now, you said that you would do away with a lot of the grasses if people have too much grass. What would you put there instead? Well, in fact, two questions. Where does this love of large lawns come from? And then if you're not going to have a large, beautiful lawn, what do you have instead?
Sure. So the love of the lawns, you can trace back in America to the Industrial Revolution when the Vanderbilts and the other huge Titan families were creating these giant estates, and they would create these expansive green lawns as kind of a
Status symbol?
Status symbol and kind of the dominance over nature, and it harkens back to French garden design. And then, so it's kind of like most trends, it's people emulating the wealthy. So then it became trendy to kind of have this piece of grass that you were maintaining green, and if it was well cut, is a status symbol of how well you could keep your lawn. Now, unfortunately, it's just from an ecological standpoint, it's a monoculture. It doesn't provide any support for most of the birds and plants and other wildlife, insects, as much as our native.
Well, you come from Arizona, and people just ripped out the grass and put in rock. There's just a lot of. In fact, people coming from the north would often they would break up their lawnmower into a sculpture and put it on the rock on the lawn.
Sure.
But that's not very attractive,
No, and it's not what the native Tucson environment looks like. The Sonoran Desert is the greenest desert in the world. It gets almost about a foot of rain a year. And so when you're out in the Sonoran Desert, there's plants everywhere, and so
and incredible amounts of wildlife. Rabbits are everywhere. And I was surprised when I lived there that I went there to a desert. In my mind, I said it's a desert, therefore I thought dead. And when I walked through the desert, I said, my God, it's alive. There's coyotes and there's rabbits and turtles and of course lizards. Gila monsters.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It is one of the most beautiful places that I've lived, and I think what Tucson does really well, and what I see landscape architects doing in Tucson is working with nature, trying to recreate the patterns and the palettes that they're finding in the environment naturally, and so with that. If you look at Tucson versus Phoenix has a much more California view of water, where they're trying to emulate things that aren't there.
I am shocked they even still have water there. It's a desert, and they use water like they're on the coast or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was. I think the average Phoenician uses 2.5 times as much water as a Tucsonan. It's just a totally different mentality.
And here, we do have water restriction from time to time, but the future doesn't bode well for water availability, right? Look at Falcon Lake. It's often at 15% of capacity. It's very, very low all the time.
Yes, and I don't think most people realize where our water comes from. I think because Falcon Lake is so far away from Brownsville, so far removed, that unless you're paying attention and trying to see what the lake level is, you don't ever see it. And I think that that's not a good problem to have. I think a
few years ago, no, but not a few, about I guess 30 years ago, they were working hard to build a small dam east of Brownsville, a weir, they called it, and it was going to provide storage for a lot of water that falls on this side of the valley. There's more rainfall here, and so it goes into the river and goes away, and so it's a way of preserving that. But I think they couldn't get the agreements on both sides, to build this thing. So, they're going to build the weir, and it was going to provide two things: more water, obviously for everyone, and then the other thing it was going to do was to provide some degree of border security, because it's going to raise the water level, in the river by about 12 feet. Also, it was going to provide some opportunity for a river walk, because the river would be more of an actual river and attractive in that way. But I don't know whatever happened to it. It was a very serious project for a while, and then just never fizzled. It's difficult here because you got to get agreements on both sides to make things happen. But if we're going to go into a future of water availability that's less and less, and a lot of people don't have the lawns they would like to have because the water's expensive. So they have kind of sparse lawns, and so that's why I'm saying, what are the options of what you do? If you say, I'm not going to have a big, beautiful lawn, I'm going to use, the natural plants and grasses to create more of an economically, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for something that I can afford, sustainable, yes.
Sure. The first suggestion I have for most people is to look at the trees that you've got on site. The trees are really important as far as providing not only aesthetic beauty, but it is cost efficient to plant them on the west side of your house to shade you from the afternoon sun. You can reduce your air conditioning bills. You're providing habitat for all of our great lizards, birds. Just keep your cat indoors. And it adds value to your home. A mature tree will add quite a hefty percentage increase as opposed to not having landscape. So I would say start with trees, and then once you.
Yeah, but what trees?
Okay, great. Our ebony trees are powerhouses. The soil doesn't need to be treated or amended. They are a nitrogen fixing, so they are.
They do very well.
They do very well, and they support the most life compared to any tree. There, if you go up to an ebony and just kind of look around, there's all sorts of cool stuff going on. There's usually a highway of ants going up and down. There's spiders. It attracts butterflies. The beans are eaten by wildlife. It is a very active part of the ecosystem.
They have thorns, right?
They do have thorns, yes. If you are looking for something without thorns, I would suggest we've got our for small trees. We've got the Texas olive, which is beautiful. It is very slow growing, so if you plant one, just be prepared to wait for a while. We've got one of my favorites that's really not native to Brownsville specifically, but further north west is the Texas mountain laurel, and that is a beautiful evergreen tree, also very slow growing, but in the spring it blooms these beautiful violet flowers that smell like grape soda. I is one of my favorite things to do with people when you see one blooming. Is go smell that and see what that reminds you of.
And the jacaranda trees are very nice, right?
Oh yes. Now jacaranda are not native.
They're not native. I didn't think they were. What are they native to? The jacarandas. I
believe Central America or South America. But that's a tree that's it's a fine tree. It's not. It doesn't spread out of its range. You don't see that escaping cultivation. So, as long as you're not putting more water or resources to it than you might have another plant, that would be a fine plant.
Well, here everybody likes the live oak trees, I think, a lot. In addition to post oak, they like the live oak, great shade trees. The hackberry trees grow everywhere, and they're kind of I don't know. They're kind of trashy trees in a sense, right?
Yeah, it's a tree that you have to learn to love, but it is not one of the. It's got a soft bark, so it loses a lot of limbs, and it's got a very interesting appearance. But it creates a lot of habitat for birds. The hackberries will bring most of the birds in the neighborhood over to your house.
And the berries are edible for us, right?
Yes, they're a little sweet. Need some sugar.
What are the other fruits that come from trees that you can eat if you want to? I mean, other than obviously fruit trees, but
sure,
like the hackberry, you can have the berries if you want them.
The hackberry. Then we've got the mesquite beans are edible. You can make a flour out of them. They're very sweet.
So you could take the mesquite beans and you can make a flour and you can bake mesquite bread.
Yes,
in theory.
Yeah, I believe it has to be mixed with another type of flour.
Oh, okay.
I don't have experience in
but it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea.
Oh, sure. I think the more we learn to cultivate the resources that we have in our backyard, the better we are in touch with our environment, with our ecosystem, and kind of being more a part of that cycle of life here in Brownsville.
What projects have you worked on here in Brownsville that you particularly like, that you've done work that you're proud of?
Sure. I've been doing mostly residential. One of the projects that has been pretty fun was a home at the shores on the island.
Oh, well, that's a big project, isn't it?
It was a relatively big project. They've got quite a nice list of recommended plants, and you have to have pretty much any sort of non-walking space needs to be vegetated. So we did a very cool, densely vegetated with semi-tropical shrubs. So it had a very tropical look, but was all native plants. One of the things about my firm is we are focused on sustainability. So I don't use any plants that are not native to a 200-mile radius of a site.
Well, what an interesting criterion. And the shores is that development of the Frankies, right?
Yes, correct.
It's up north of South Padre just about a mile north of town, right? Something like that. And it's on both sides of the road.
Yes.
So how many acres did you do there?
It was just the exterior, the residence.
Okay.
So I think it was a quarter of an acre. And
would you put in drip irrigation for this, or you just let the nature take its course, so to speak?
Drip irrigation. So the systems are designed to be irrigated until establishment and then turned off unless there's an extreme drought, and then you can water them again. But I say we, it's just me right now. But I would like to make sure that irrigation is used as little as possible. So getting everything established and then turning it off.
Oh, I tell you, I had a drip irrigation system in the house that we bought 10 years ago, and I had to turn it off because everything was growing like crazy. I said, this area is subtropical. It doesn't need all this water.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're overwatering our landscapes here. There's right now, even, we've had all this nice rain and it's cool, and I still see sprinkler systems going off everywhere, which is not great.
Well, you got the timer and it just goes and you forget that. I have one myself, and sometimes I'll say, well, it rained, I need to go turn it off. But sometimes you just kind of say, just let it go. It's not going to hurt anything. But in my own case, I have a lot of grass, about 3/4 of an acre of mowing to do. And I like, it's the old British tradition. I like the big castle lawn. But I've thought often about how I could do it better. I could use natural grasses and not have to mow, such a huge expanse of things. But I have no clue how to do it. I even thought once of just making a golf green on one huge expanse. At least it'd be interesting. It doesn't necessarily cut the water costs, but you'd have a green, putting green. So that'd be fun.
Sure. Earlier you asked me what's the alternative to grasses or turf in some of these landscaped areas, and if there are also some really great ground covers, native ground covers that work in lieu of grass. If it's not something that's going to be walked or tread on quite a bit, that can withstand a little foot traffic. But frog fruit is a really cool native ground cover. You only have to plant a few, and it'll spread quite quickly. Has these really neat white flowers all year round. Attracts some of the smallest butterflies I've ever seen. Usually when you walk up to it, it's got a whole host of things feeding on it. So that's a really good, again, also very, very drought resistant. So that, and very dark, deep green. So
is that what you see around oak trees at the base? A lot of times people have a kind of circular ground cover that's really fine, deep green leaf.
I think that's an ivy.
Ivy?
There's I think that's a type of ivy that requires a lot of water.
Oh, does it?
I think I think
how about
we're
the
thinking
ivy
the same thing.
that some people have growing up the sides of their homes, which looks really cool, I think. But does that take a lot of water?
Yes, ivy is not the most drought resistant, and I'm always a little cautious about putting any sort of vines on structures just to make sure that there's not any sort of.
It creates decay or what?
It can. I mean, it can hold moisture up to, if you have brick, sometimes the roots can penetrate the surface of the brick, and then also it holds moisture to the brick, which isn't great. Brick should have airflow to keep it dry.
But does it have a cooling effect on the house? Is it insulative?
It would, yes. It would have a cooling effect on the home.
Yeah, maybe that's why some people do it.
Yeah.
I knew a guy who lived out in the country, and he just let the natural world grow right up to within about 2 feet of his house. He trimmed the trees and stuff as necessary, but it was just native grasses, whatever grew there to grew, and he just kind of kept it trimmed around the house closely. But other than that, he just lived in nature.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, it's so foreign, really, to a lot of our upbringings, where it was keeping a nice lawn, edging the lawn. A good edging job was everything. I call it the Germanic influence of of symmetry. You got to have the symmetry. It's got to be nicely blocked off and neat.
Yes. That's it's interesting. I think if you are to look at landscape architecture in our bigger cities and kind of where the designs are moving towards is the more naturalistic, the messier looking landscapes. And so I'm excited to find clients brave enough to be the pioneers of the native scapes here.
Long ago, when I was up in, I lived for a couple of years in Oregon, and there was, the lawns there, as you can imagine, were pristine, immaculate, emerald green, except for this one guy who let his lawn go. It was all natural, you might say. And he had a sign out there, because I guess people bugged him about it. And he had a sign out there. He said, "We are readers, not weeders."
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
So, well, tell me, how do people get a hold of you?
Sure. I have a website. It's www.sable.design. I also have an Instagram account. It's created. We're gonna launch the social media aspect in 2024, and that is sable.design. Is our Instagram.
So you'll
handle.
have lots of photos of your work and before and after projects, I suppose.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The website has kind of a brief storyline, and as my professional portfolio, and as our projects start to age and look a little bit better than first planning, we'll start putting up the photos.
Now you said you grew up here, right?
I did, yes.
And what part of Brownsville did you grow up in?
So I lived in Bayview and Laguna Vista growing up, and then I went to I graduated from St. Joe in 2002.
Bayview is such an interesting little community. I think it was created. I really don't know. I'm just guessing. It's been around for over 100 years, right?
Yeah, it's got a really interesting story. There's some houses that were built by just really interesting characters from out of town. There's
what is that pink mansion?
The pink mansion that was built by a baseball player, I believe, was a professional baseball player that built that mansion. That's Mike Boswell's house.
And it was built in the 20s.
I believe the 20s. Like, yeah.
Wow. Must be hard to deal with the upkeep of that. Being the pipes must be difficult.
Yeah, I remember going over there and just it was kind of the first haunted mansion that I'd ever been to before. It was just had a very an interesting feel, and
yeah, definitely an old world feel there, it's for sure.
But beautiful design.
And did you grew up on a Resaca out there?
Yes, I grew pretty much across the Resaca from the Big Pink House.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you had your own alligator?
It's funny. The alligators kind of started creeping in as we left Bayview we left Bayview in '96 to move to Los Fresnos. And we used to swim in the Resaca. We had jet skis and boats and things out there. And then we started getting more reports of people seeing alligators, and then they started nesting on the banks near a friend of ours' houses. And so it was...
So I guess we won't swim anymore.
Yeah, I saw one time when I was in the water, but it was a small one, and I think that was when I kind of had maybe enough of the Resaca swimming.
How deep was it?
Yeah, when it was full, it was probably 8 feet in the middle.
Oh, that's deep.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because I live on a Resaca now, and it's probably 4 feet in the middle.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, that's pretty shallow.
And you could, I'm sure that you could. On the right days, it was probably fairly clear. You could probably see down a bit, or no?
I don't think I've ever seen a clear day in the Resaca. That silt is...
the silt has been there for a long time. I thought maybe back, we went back enough years that the silt wouldn't have been as bad. But I guess it's pumped. That's the Los Cuates, isn't it? That Resaca out there that goes through Bayview?
I believe so.
So it flows through Los Fresnos and out to... So it travels a long way from the river. So I guess it would carry a lot of silt.
And we've removed a lot of the the things that we should... The native vegetation that grows in the Resacas, like the cattails and... A lot of that's been removed, and so those are the really great filters for our Resacas. And so, the more of those we put back in place, the cleaner our water would be.
Good idea. So people removed them just so they could get to the water. It was in the way of docks and things.
Sure. Yeah. They're I think to make sure that they didn't interfere with the piping in and out, and then pumps, also just aesthetically, so people could have that bare view of their Resaca.
The agricultural pumps and lawn pumps, yes, of course, yes. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I've enjoyed the lesson you've given me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for watching this BSPA video. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you like what you see. And if you really like what you see, go ahead and go to our website, brosoperformingarts.org, and smash the donate button. And then we'll really like you too.